know, well, first tell us a little bit more about who you are. Like, how long have you lived here in Hawaii, and what part of Hawaii, where do you live? And tell us a little bit about yourself.
I do live in Hawaii. I live in Pololo. I moved back here when I was 6 years old. I was born in Washington State. My dad was in the military, so we were stationed up there, and then we moved back when I was 6. And then pretty much we lived in Pololo.
Well, that's exciting. So when you were living in Pololo, you went to school and everything, lived around, and you know your neighbors, everybody in Pololo.
Yeah, when I was growing up, I went to Anuenue Elementary School. It was an elementary school closest to me. And then around 5th, 6th grade, we started moving around a bit. So I went to move to Manoa, and we stayed with my aunt and uncle over there.
That's wonderful. Did you go to the other islands as well, the Big Island, before, or just recently?
I just recently went to the Big Island just last year.
Okay. Yeah. So have you, when was the first time that you registered to vote?
I just recently registered to vote in 2010.
In 2010?
Yeah.
And how did that happen, or what caused you to register to vote in 2010?
That was like the first commitment I had made on the Kanu website.
And how did you come across the Kanu website?
I was always interested in like technology and sustainability, and I was had just joined Twitter, and then Twitter usually suggests like people who you should follow based on your interest, and then one of the people they suggested was Olin. So I started following him, and he always posted these interesting tweets, and one of them just happened to be a link to the Kanu website, and then that's where I learned more about what Kanu was and how you became the change that you wanted to see in the world by making personal commitments. And so I didn't really want to make too hard a commitment, like taking cold showers or riding the bike to work every day or that kind of thing. So I looked for something that was like super easy that I could do and take some action. So I saw the commitment to vote in the 2010 election, and that's what I did.
Well, that's awesome. How in the 2010 election, at that time, you were able to vote for how many years? How many years you could have voted, but before you had not voted? Does that make sense? That question. Like I could have voted since 1998, but I didn't register to vote until 2008. So when were you able to vote?
I probably was able to vote in 1994.
But then you made this commitment to vote in 2010.
That sounds so long ago.
No. Wow, so that's a very big thing. Okay,
yeah.
So then 2010 came around, election time, and you went and you voted. And then how did you feel?
I felt good, but I felt like I wasn't really sure, like, okay, who did I vote for, and what are these people going to be doing for me,
Right.
So luckily, Kanu Hawaii and Common Cause Hawaii, they had hosted a legislative workshop similar to what we're doing today, but a little bit different. And so I went down and learned about the process.
So this was after the election?
This was after the election. I just was trying to find out more information of what goes on behind the scenes, like what do the people I voted for, what do they actually do?
Well, that's wonderful. How often were those workshops? Do you remember, or how often did you go?
Well, the legislative workshops, they just had it in the December of 2010, so it was just talking about the process. And then, like Charlene said, that we had these weekly Rotunda roundups, and where we would come every Thursday after work and just talk about issues, and they would always give us these action steps that we would take at the end, where we could go up and visit our officials, or sign letters and drop it off at their office, and things that you could do like immediately, and just take action.
And you participated in that.
Oh yeah.
And did you meet some of the representatives? And...
I met a bunch of them.
Yeah?
Yeah.
That's wonderful. And then, so this is now timeline 2010, December.
And then January 2011, that's when we had all the Rotunda roundups.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then when the legislative session ended, around May, correct? No, before then.
Yeah, May.
Yeah.
Around May. And then what happened next?
Went back to work and yeah, just it kind of like fell off the radar because I really didn't know what to do like when there wasn't the legislative session. It's like I didn't know how else I could participate.
Right, because you just registered to vote, you voted, and you found out all this wonderful information, and then all of a sudden when the session was over, then I was, okay, what do we do now? And then at that time, did you also move off island, or?
At that time, my uncle had just moved back to the Big Island,
Mm-hmm.
and we have property on the Big Island, and he wanted to live on the property, but it was totally off the grid, so there's no electricity or running water. And then so I decided to go to the Big Island to help him out and try to start a small garden or get our farm going a little bit.
And then you were thinking about this, did any of this, the legislative session, the vote, and all the new information, like, this is stuff that was new to you, right? Like,
yeah.
Because we had not voted before, and you've learned all these new things and becoming aware of all these new issues and things that are going on, and now you're more involved and you're being more aware of your surroundings, right? So then, what would happen next?
Well, being on the Big Island and being off the grid, it's like when the sun goes down, there's not very much to do. So you're really disconnected from the world, and you have a lot of time to think, and you have a lot of time for self-reflection. And one of the things I thought about was, why didn't I vote until 2010? Well, what was it about? Why was I kept away from all of this thing that I was so happy to be involved with in 2011? And then I thought about that we need to be, I think I just didn't feel empowered to be a part of that process. And then I wanted to, try to think, what kind of Hawaii do I want to see? And I want to see a Hawaii that is more participatory, where we, become involved and we take action, and we're more like civically engaged. And so I thought, okay, so, how am I going to do this? So what other way to become more civically engaged than to run for office? So that's what I did. I came back in April of 2012, and I went down to apply to run for the House of Representatives.
Wow, that's quite a big move. I mean, from not voting and all of a sudden now you're registering to run for office. That's exciting.
Yeah.
So then, did you know anything about this process?
No, it's totally different process from learning how the legislature works and to learning about how to run for office and how to campaign. So I was totally clueless about how that entire process worked. So it was more like trial and error, learn by doing.
Okay, you jumped right in.
Jump right in. But luckily at the same time, I was volunteering with Kanu, and then they had just started doing this outreach projects to get people to vote, register to vote, and vote in the elections. So, not only was I canvassing my own neighborhood to try to find people to learn more about the constituents in my district, but I also was going to other districts. So we had the first pilot project was in Kaneohe, and so our main goal was to try to go through the neighborhood and try to find out what issues were most important to them, and then try to collect that information. Also try to provide information about their representatives that were running in that district.
And through the engaging from people to people, you learned about things that were important to them. And when they said that they had not, or were you also getting them to register to vote, right? And if they were not registered to vote, did you share that you were also a new voter?
I think like some of the times, not everyone, yeah, but yeah, I would let people know. Yeah, I just had recently registered to vote, and I just voted last election, and I plan to vote again.
That's exciting. Okay, so in 2010, you registered to vote. You came across through Owen, you came across Kanu. From Kanu, you registered to vote. You voted the first time. You got involved with the rotunda, the legislative rotunda, the capital workshops. Then you actually met legislators. Then you went off island. You came back and you decided to run for office. And now the primary elections ended in July, and then you got more involved in Kanu, correct?
Yeah, I got more involved in Kanu because I didn't move past the primary. I had run as independent, and it was very hard to connect with other independents, especially during the primary election, because when you vote in the primary election, you usually have to choose a party that you wanted to be affiliated with, and you can only vote for the people in those parties. So I think I got a total of like 13 votes out of all the people in my district, but it's not bad considering that it was out of total, I think about like 31 or 39 total independent voters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And plus, it was a very short period. I mean, there was just a few months of time to actually meet people, talk to people, and do your campaign together.
Yeah.
But it was a great experience.
Like next time, I think, yeah, starting maybe in January would be more beneficial, and you can talk to more people. But yeah, it's definitely a learning process.
Awesome. So let's fast forward a little bit forward, and then you got more involved in Kanu, and Kanu continued to do the campaigning up until when election day, people voted. And then what were you doing with Kanu, where you got involved with the issues that were most important to you?
Yeah, so like when we were going through the neighborhoods, we would always ask, try to find out at least one issue that was important to people in those neighborhoods. And we always tried to target those neighborhoods that were underrepresented, that normally did not vote or did not have a voice in the legislative process. So we wanted to find out what their concerns was. And so with Kanu, we not only doing door-to-door canvassing, but also online. We had also posed those questions to the online audience and try to gather information that way. And we had built like these issue clouds that kind of showed you all the people in that neighborhood. Like we did it by zip code, so you could see what their main concerns were. Like, would it be rail or education or roads or traffic? So you kind of get a general idea of what each neighborhood was like and what their concerns were. And then I think our challenge was to try to take their concerns and figure out, okay, like education or transportation, food. But one of the things that I was always interested in was like good government and ethics and transparency. So one of the things that I wanted to focus on was this thing called gut and replace.
That sounds kind of awful. Can you explain?
Okay, gut and replace has to do with bills. So when we're trying to pass laws, everything is introduced as a bill, and it goes through, it's introduced in either house, and then it goes through certain committees and gets transferred over to the other house, and then if they're okay with it, then they'll send it back to the originating house, and then from there, it'll go to the governor if it passes. So, gun and replace is this. It goes like, it's where you take entire sections of a bill that had already moved past committees, and you take out entire sections of the bill and replace it with something else.
So it could end up being something that's completely opposite of what it was originally meant for?
One example that was in the Honolulu Weekly was, we were talking about like Senate Bill 755, I think it was. And it had started originally as like a tax holiday bill, where they would give like a tax break for during like a back to school season, where they would like give 5 days where they would have they wouldn't charge taxes on certain items, and then like later that year it had been gutted and replaced to become peer-to-peer poker gambling.
What?
Bill.
Wait, school supplies and poker, that's different?
Yeah, totally different. And then like I think it just stopped in one of the committees in 2011, but then in 2012 they had resurrected it, and then it now became a bill to exempt, to give exemptions for development. So you would exempt certain environmental regulations that you normally would have to go through.
Wait, so the span of this bill was from back to school to gambling and now to environment?
Yeah, to development.
To development?
Yeah.
Well, and so that's what gut and replace means. Like they can take a bill and totally like change it up.
Yeah.
And that happens everywhere, or?
Well, that's the thing that what we did in our policy work group was, my job was to, okay, let's do some policy analysis. So that's what they tried to teach us. I'm not sure how well they did, but it's basically you have a basic idea of the synopsis of what you're researching, and then you find like 3 pros and 3 cons, for and against it, and you find out who the if you decide to take certain action, like say we want to eliminate this use of gut and replace, who would the winners be and who would the losers be? Because with any policy decision, there's going to be winners and losers. And also, what they had asked is like, okay, are they doing anything about this like someplace else?
Right.
Yeah.
So how was your research?
Research, my go-to research tool is Google. So, I don't know. I'm not sure if that's the best place to start, but that's where I started. So I found a lot of information about gut and replace in Hawaii. So there had been like, I think dozens of articles written just this past year about gut and replace. And then I think there was a total about like 36 bills that had been gutted and replaced. But trying to find out like more information like elsewhere was a little bit difficult, and I always kept up coming with like things about bathrooms or things about fishing or things about like fixing cars but eventually I did like stumble across this article from Pennsylvania, and then they were talking about how something similar had happened in Pennsylvania. And then it actually went to their Commonwealth Court, and what had happened was these people had been prosecuted under like a hate crimes law, and then they decided to like contest it in court and said that this law was created unconstitutionally. And then I was saying, okay, so what's different about the way that their laws are made and the way our laws are made? And then that's what I found this. I know my memory is not too good, so it's basically it comes down to like how laws are made. So in Hawaii's Constitution, I think it's Article 3, Section 14, it says, "No law shall be passed except by bill, and each law shall embrace but one subject, which shall be expressed in its title." And then in Pennsylvania's Constitution, it says, it's kind of similar. It says, "No law shall be passed except by bill, and no bill shall be so altered or amended on its passage through either house as to change its original purpose." So I thought, okay, that's probably, why we have so much gut replace in Hawaii, is because our wording is a little bit different. So, the bills can be passed, with one subject as long as the title remains the same, and it's relative, and the content is relevant to the title. But in Pennsylvania, the original purpose of the bill and the intent has to be the same, from beginning to end.
From beginning to end. So in Pennsylvania, something that started for back to school supplies cannot go to gambling, cannot go to environmental. That would never happen in Pennsylvania.
Well, even if it did happen, it would later be overturned, probably by
because they have it in the wording. So then now, you found this information that we have an example. We have an example from another state. So then, what did you do next?
Okay, so we had our policy meeting, and then that was. We just introduced all the different policies that we were working on. That's the one I was working on. And then a couple weeks later, I think Carmelo Lim and Nikki Love from Common Cause Hawaii, they were putting together like a ethics and transparency group, and they had a meeting set up with Senator Ihara, just a few doors down from here. And they had invited me to come because they knew I was interested in this kind of thing. Okay. So I said, okay, I'll be there. So I had printed up a copy of that case. I think it was Markevich versus Rendell, 2007.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's an interesting read. And then I just put like my one-page policy analysis that I had done. It was cheeky, but
it was important. It was things that are important to you, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
So and then I passed it out at the beginning of the meeting, and then I think that was the first thing we talked about it, and then Senator Ihara asked, so what should we do? I said, I think we should have a constitutional amendment to change our wording to match Pennsylvania's. And then, he said, yeah, let's work on that. So hopefully this year it'll be introduced as a bill, for a constitutional amendment to change our wording to match Pennsylvania, so we can stop some practice of gun in place.
That's really exciting, because that would, like you said, recently, there were like 36 different gut and replace.
Yeah. They're not all as extreme as the Senate Bill 755, but
that would certainly help.
Yes.
So that's exciting. So what happens next? What did Senator say that would be the next steps?
Well, I think the main meaning we're trying to not only trying to find ways we can change things by passing legislation, but also trying to do work on how the legislative rules are, and then if we could try to change some of their practices to be more open and transparent. So not only trying to pass legislation, but try to change the way that how legislators do their work, or try to they have their own rules that they go through, and then in the way that they conduct themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
This so at the last meeting with the senator, was he the one who was going to draft the bill? Because the bill is a legal document, yeah?
Yeah.
So then, did you have to draft the bill?
No, I hope I don't have to draft the bill. But hopefully, it's in the work, and then that's why we have teams of people that can help each other out.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's exciting. So then, okay, so what can we do to help?
What can everyone do is, find out who your representatives are.
Wait, actually, I was slide.
Oh.
Oh.
Awesome.
Yes, I thought about it. Sorry. Come on. There we go.
Okay, so this is what we can do. Yeah, so decide whether you agree or disagree with legislators changing the original intent of the bill and passing it without public input. Find your state representative and senator on the state website. And then email or call them and let them know how you feel about the practice of gun in place. So.
And they can do that immediately? They can do that now?
You can do it right now if you wanted to.
We don't have to wait till the bill actually is formed and actually in session?
No, because you can let them know that that you don't like or you like gun in replace, and however you feel about it, you can let them know. You don't have to wait till there's an actual bill there.
And does it have to be like a formal request, or is it just as easy as just calling it up and saying, hey, I heard about this and this is how I feel, and that's all they need to do, just to get the conversation going?
Yeah, I think, just give it a call and see how it works.
Oh, that's awesome. Do we have questions in the audience for anything about, for Joe? Kelsey?
Well, I'm still wondering about gut and replaced exactly. So I understand it's when legislators change the content of the bill, as long as it still sort of sounds like it could relate to the title. It's sort of like a loophole, right? Why is that perceived possibly, you seem to think that it's a bad thing, so what's bad about it? What kind of problems does it cause? But also, why do they do it? Is there a good purpose to it or something?
Well, I think bills, you have to be able to expand and amend them. They can't they will pass through different committees and then,
And they're trying to pass it as the same exact thing as it got passed through both the House and the Senate.
What do you mean?
Because I'm surprised that it can, a bill can go from being about a tax on school supplies to being about poker and then to being about development issues. So it's not so much that they're just recycling the bill number, they're actually passing it as the same exact bill. They're saying this is the same bill.
The only thing that stays the same about the bill is the bill number and the title. And anything else within it can change as long as the content is still relevant to the title. Yeah. So that's how it works now. And then hopefully in the future we'll make it so that it can't be changed too drastically.
Yeah. Is it more like they keep most of the content of the bill, then put in an extra paragraph?
Sometimes.
Or is it the whole thing?
I think they don't usually just add something that's separate to it, just because it has to have one subject. But most times they'll gut the whole thing and replace it with something else. Yeah.
Owen?
So it's actually addresses Kelsey's question. Like we had a bunch of Kanu members last session submit testimony about a particular bill that dealt with agriculture, and they was gutted and replaced, and it dealt with GMO. And so we had a case where we all submitted testimony for this bill in support of this bill, which became an opposite kind of bill. And so I think that's the case. But the question to you, Joe, is can a bill be gutted and replaced and then be voted on without any public input?
I do not know, but I believe so that I can, as long as it had gone through. I think we needed like 3 separate hearings, but I think it can. But I don't think like my solution would be able to solve the problem with the Kanu members had, because I think that one still dealt with agriculture, and that the discrete activity would still be handled by the purpose of that bill.
Have you run into any special interests that like oppose your bill that tried to stop it?
To stop my bill? I don't think it's a bill yet. So,
They're working on it.
Yeah.
I think they're working on it.
but of course, there are pros and cons to any policy decision. So like some of the cons would be is like it'll take longer to reintroduce legislation. So if you had something that was going and you thought, okay, yeah, we need to have this legislation, and if you can't like reintroduce it into some other bill, then you probably have to wait until next year. So it'll take longer to do that. And also, I think a lot of it has to do with just trying to do things in a timely fashion. So because our legislative session is kind of short, we need to try to get as much done as we can. So there's pros and cons to everything, and you just have to decide what do you value more. And for me, it's like I'd rather have an open and transparent government and the way we do things. Any other questions?
Were you able to determine if gun replace was an official term, or at least a widely known term outside of the state of Hawaii, or was that one of the reasons why you had trouble finding examples?
I'm not sure if it's an official term,
Yeah.
but I think it's definitely an official term in Hawaii. But I think like some other states do use it, but I'm not sure what the official term is.
There was an issue that I was passionate about with gun replace, and I wanted to figure out if someone like you, Joe, was trying to create it turn it into a bill, or if it was something that came up in a previous legislative session. Where would be the best place to go on that?
For me, I would check the Capitol website and then look at some bill that because they archive all the bills. So I would check the Capitol website. Search for a bill that you're interested in, and then check out the testimony, because they put out everyone's testimony that's there, and then you'll have a good idea of like the pros and cons for that particular issue. And also you can find people who might be aligned with your issue or what your concern is, and then I would try to contact them and see how can I take part, or can you at least help me, point me in the right direction of what I should do and how I can participate. Yeah. So definitely try to team me up with other people.
So even old bills that died, they're archived there.
I don't know how far back it goes, but yeah.
1997.
1997, yeah, it's good to know.
And what part of the process do they do the gun replace? Because everybody has to vote on it until it becomes a law. right? And is it that, can you do that along, even after they voted, or?
Well, got to replace is like part of the amendment process, because when it goes to a committee, they can amend the bill, and so they will change it to be something more, or they might leave it alone, or they might change it a little bit, or they might change it a lot, and that's so like if you ever look at any of the bills in the Capitol website, they always have like either like a SB for the Senate or HB for the House, and then they might have like a HD1 or SD1 or SD2, depending on like if there were different drafts made up.
But the voting process is after the revisions
Oh,
and addendums, right? So how is it that the gut and replace passed by? Did they not read the bill until?
well, sometimes the public may be unaware because they might not be following like each individual. There is, I think, maybe like 2,000 some odd bills that were introduced last year, and then for like the average citizen to follow each one to make sure that it's not being gutted and replaced by something else is a little bit difficult. So sometimes it can like slip under the radar.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So like with Odin's example, where they had went and submitted testimony, at what part of the stage of the bill was that? In the very beginning?
I don't know.
Is that in the very beginning when they do testimony, or is that at the end once the bill is final?
I think whenever they do a hearing, they will, you can submit testimony.
Mm-hmm. But then after you submit testimony, then it can still get changed, because that's what happened, right?
Well, the thing about public testimony is, yes, it is your voice, but what our testimony is just to help our legislators decide what to do. So it is still up to the our legislators to, take that action. Yeah, so they can still change things.
Wow. There's a lot to learn still.
Yeah, I'm still part of the learning process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions out in the audience?
What could you do if you were just a citizen and you happen to read a bill or see that there's gutting and replacing like going on, like for a specific bill, like what could you do to like make a difference just as a citizen?
Well, I would say first, call your legislators and let them know that you don't agree with that practice, and then you would ask them not to do the other place. But if you happen to find a bill that you are following and that you thought was good and it's been better replaced, and just let people know, spread the word. And you think if you didn't think it was the right thing to do, then speak up.
But then what like role, like if let's say there's a bill that is good or people like, and then they put something else in it or change it, like how can the public influence, like the public doesn't vote on these things.
Yeah.
So you just talk about it and get your representative to influence your representative.
And then that's building public awareness about certain activities that our legislators do. That's one thing. Or we can contact our legislator directly and try to get them to change their mind or change the way it's done.
If I might ask, we actually have a legislator here. Representative Chris Lee is here. So if I could put you on the spot, what would you want your constituents or any citizen, what would make them listen to you?
It's difficult because it depends on the issue. I mean, let's say, what's an issue that's important to you? Oh, let's talk about one of the ones that came up earlier. So the food bill was a bill that I introduced last year, and it did all kinds of great stuff. Basically, it was all about encouraging local food production. And at the end of the day, after a process that included lots of public testimony and support from folks from across the state, went through multiple hearings in different committees where each committee got to weigh in on the substance of the bill. So the Agriculture Committee decided, is this good for agriculture? The Committee on Finance decided, can we afford this? And it got all the way up to the end. And at the end, what happened was the language was pulled out, the good language that everyone had supported, and other language was put in, which was basically contrary to what the substance of the bill was before, at the last minute. And so at that point, after the committee process, at the very end, there's always going to be a final vote of both houses. The entire House and the entire Senate will get to vote on the final bill. And so that's really where, after seeing the changes made to the bill, you get a chance to weigh in. And what's important is that each of you lives in, or each of all of us actually, lives in a district with a senator and a representative, one in each house, and they're going to be swayed most by their own constituents. You know, if you vote for me, for example, I'm going to be listening to you because that's my job. I represent you. So make sure you reach out to those folks first and say, I have problems with this, or I love this. And then the other thing you can do, which is really important, because often your own representative may not be the key person, who might not be the chair of that committee, who decides the fate of the bill, the fate of the amendments. Find out who is, and reach out to the people, the friends, family you have in that district. And you can do a search online to figure out, at the Capitol website here, where you live, where other people might live, and find people in that district and have them be the ones to make contact, because they're that person's constituents. And there's a lot of gravity and a lot of voice given to those folks who live in that given area. There's just one catch to this, and it really underscores the whole reason why this issue has come about, because there was, for example, a bill last year that created the Public Lands Development Corporation, which, if you've heard about it, great. If you haven't, basically it's a very controversial thing. Love it or hate it. And it went through the process and went through multiple committees, each one hearing public testimony on the substance of the bill. At the last committee hearing, the public testified, and then amendments were made in the final committee after the fact. And then it went for a final vote. So the amendments put in never actually had public testimony given upon them. And that's the issue. And so at that point, that's where this really becomes a relevant discussion. But anyway.
So you were saying that instead of me, myself, and I contacting the chair of the committee, I should find one of their constituents and have them contact the chair of the committee, even though the chair of the committee is the chair of the committee for the whole state in which I live.
Absolutely, because not the whole state's...
The chair of the committee has that decision-making power to change the language after it's all been...
Yes, I mean, it depends on a lot of things, but generally, 99.9% of the time, the chair of the committee has the discretion to suggest changes to the bill. And so they, in their committee, manage the bills and they set the agenda. So the rest of the committee gets to vote on what the chair puts forward, but the chair ultimately decides the substance.
And who chooses these chairs that seem to wield this lots of power?
So in the House, it's the Speaker of the House. In the Senate, it's the President of the Senate. And the idea is that you have a collective body, just like a classroom or something, and you're going to have a head of a classroom selected by other peers. So collectively in the House, we all vote for a Speaker of the House, and that person then designates chairs and committee structure, and folks are going to be responsible for the subject matter areas.
Is there any way to find out, well, and we'll speak specifically about this one, who recommended those changes at the end?
You know, it's hard because a lot of this stuff happens truly behind the scenes. And that's not to say it's a negative thing all the time. Often, 60-day session is so fast. And you have, as he was mentioning, like 2,000 plus bills that are moving along, each one needing 3 votes on the floor plus multiple committee hearings. So you have like tens of thousands of individual steps taken, and there's just not enough time in the day. So what happens is one chair from the House will go to meet with their counterpart chair in the Senate, and they'll say, all right, what do you want to do about this? Come to an agreement, say, okay, take the bills back to the committees, and you push it along.
Could the process be more transparent if the legislative session was a bit longer?
Oh yeah, in fact, absolutely. You know, my first year I did a bill to lengthen it by another 30 days, basically. So instead of 48 hours notice, you'd have at least 72 hours. I mean, it's not perfect, right? I mean, you're never going to have a system where everybody has all the time to see everything. I mean, we don't even, have an idea of what's going on at the time. You've got to really rely on your counterparts in their various roles as committee chairs or on members of a committee to really let you know what's going on in that area of the law. And so one of the things that I think is important is making sure that people can participate, do have an idea of what's going on to the extent possible. And it's hard because just as we're here now, we've been here all day, and you guys have probably been at your jobs at school and everything else. And you can't, I mean, as a regular citizen, truly follow things along to the extent that it would be ideal to. So again, that's where organizing and organizations like this really step in, because they provide that window into what's happening to be able to follow along. In fact, there have been a number of attempts. In fact, the Sierra Club has done kind of a Capital Watch group, and there have been, Kanu's been involved in a number of things before. Just organizing folks around issue areas. So they'll say, if you're interested in energy, for example, then we're going to have someone who's dedicated to tracking all the various bills of interest in that area, and they'll kick out an email to you if you sign up. Or Cheryl will be the point of contact to let you guys know what's coming up, so that you don't have to have your nose down here poking around 24 hours a day just to get an idea what's going on, but you'll actually be notified when it's really important to step up to the plate and provide testimony or meet somebody.
So, related to that, and the tracking, I have a question for you, Joe. How do you, so we know your bill is being drafted right now.
Okay.
You work, you have a job, right? You're a Kanu Fellow, you've got all these other responsibilities. What are you gonna do once your bill is real?
So I'm gonna take my own advice. I'm gonna go back to like previous bills, like the SB 755 that people had problems with getting replaced, and try to find the people who were against it and try to gather their emails and phone numbers and contact them and say, you know, I have this bill that's going through. It's about, you know, the things that we all don't like, namely getting replaced, and please support it, call people, let people know, and just try to get the word out and try to build some momentum.
Have you submitted testimony before on a bill?
Yeah. So like one of the other commitments that Kanu had put up was submit testimony on a bill. So I just happened to go down to the Capitol one day and randomly pick a topic off the boards out here, and then it just had to be something that I was interested in, and it was about zombies. So.
But you have to elaborate on that.
No. Well, it's more about zombie computers and internet security, and how, you know, it's kind of technical, but yeah.
So did you walk your testimony into the legislator, or like, because I noticed there's a submit testimony icon up there. Did you do it online?
I just clicked the submit testimony icon and did it online. Yeah.
Can you talk a little about the boards you referenced? So you came down.
Well, like in the hallways out here, there are these clipboards, kind of, and they just hang outside, and then they have like agendas or like things that are coming up, and then sometimes they'll show like certain bills that are going to be heard, and then I just the ones that are going to be heard, they usually accept testimony on those, so I just picked one of those and submitted my testimony on that.
The audience? Comments?
Can I just comment real quick?
Yeah.
This is actually fantastic, having these kinds of forums, because it's the power of organization that really drives issues, I think, in the political arena. I've learned that the hard way. I've had great things I've tried to do totally shot down by folks who are organized, even though we totally outnumber them in support. But if you can at least not just only testify for the first time on a bill or take part in one issue, but rather find 4 or 5 other people in your area who care about the same thing and keep them in the loop, so that you become a conduit for those folks and become that de facto organizer to say that, by the way, this bill's up for hearing and we need just a quick letter of support. 2 sentences on the Capitol. Actually, you don't even have to type anything. There's a yes or no email submit. And one of the things that we're working on this year in the committee I'll be chairing is actually being able to translate that into social media, to be able to accept testimony direct from Facebook, for example, or other types of communication. And the idea would be that it's an existing network of people, so you're not just asking one person to do it, but everyone else can see that they're getting involved. And the issue, whatever it might be, that they're feeling is pretty important, their folks around them probably feels pretty important too. So it's really reaching out beyond just the handful of folks who typically are not just lobbyists here, but are the regular testifiers here, and really broadening it and democratizing the process.
So what's this committee you're chairing? The Twitter committee?
Oh, yeah, and I'll be chairing energy and environmental protection in the House.
So not the Twitter.
Yeah, so there'll be a lot of actually really important issues coming up this year relating to energy use, relating to land use, and climate change, and everything. So we're hoping to get some new voices in the mix.
And what's your district?
And I represent Kailu and Lebanon in the House.
Any last words, Joe or Ashmi?
No, just hearing your story was very fascinating because I can totally relate. Like, I've never voted, and all of a sudden you're diving in and drafting or helping bills come about. So that's exciting. I'm definitely going to get more involved this year too. So thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you, Joe. Alright, so I'm just going to go back to our last slide here. Those folks who are joining us online, I think Joe's made a really good case on why gut and replace, can be harmful and can take away the public's voice. And even if you don't agree with that, if you think, well, there's some instances where gut and replace worked, and there are times when gut and replace has passed a seemingly good bill. Maybe it did good things that people actually wanted. But the bottom line is that whether it was a good or a bad bill, public input wasn't heard all the way through on that same bill. And I think that's what Joe's trying to argue here, is that we want to make sure that the public's voice, people's voices are heard throughout that process, and that we know what we're actually submitting testimony on, and we know what bills are really passing. So whether you agree or disagree, the main thing is that you make your voice heard. And so find out who your state representative and your senator are, and give them a call. You can email them. They're very accessible. I really like how our state legislature is very open. The Capitol building is easy. It's not easy to navigate necessarily because it all looks the same, but the doors are always open. It's really cool. The representatives and senators, they don't lock their doors. You can knock, walk in, and the office managers and the staff members are really helpful. And the public access room, which is actually in 401 on this floor, is also a great place to start. And Suzanne Marinelli and her staff are very helpful in helping you figure out what's going on here. Who do I contact? How does it all work? So join us and take some action steps, and hopefully we'll get to see Joe's bill moving through the legislative session pretty soon. It's exciting. All right, with that, thanks for joining us, and we're going to archive this video, and it'll be on our website. Owen?
That's the plan.
Okay.
Yeah, the internet was going on and off, okay. So
hopefully
we'll see
we'll be able to
yeah.
catch
Right.
most of this. It's online. But thanks everybody for joining us, and help yourself to more refreshments, and feel free to stay for a bit and talk story. If you have more questions for Joe, you want to ask him. So.